session this year is chaos, and we'll be starting with the first talk in our series titled Hues of Chaos that highlights chaos in different disciplines. So today we have Professor Anil Zankar who's going to be talking about chaos in cinema. Professor Anil Zankar is the recipient of two national awards, one for a film script and the other for a book on cinema. He has 35 years of experience in filmmaking, teaching, and writing. And he's also a visiting faculty in the Humanities and Social Sciences Department at IISER Pune. Additionally, he's also made 21 short films on various themes ranging from social issues and institutions to biopics. He was also an editor of a magazine titled Lights, Camera, Action, published in collaboration with the BFI UK. We are extremely happy to have Professor Zankar with us today, and the virtual floor is now all yours.
Okay. Thank you very much and good evening. Uh, you have chosen a very peculiar theme, I must say, for this chaos. And I guess some of you have been my students, so I feel that you should think of me first to talk about this topic based on personal experience. I have a suspicion, but that's a good choice you made in any case. So I actually was very struck by this topic because I've spoken over the years on cinema in various groups and various topics, etc. But chaos is something that in cinema I had never thought of. So it set me thinking, and I found some very interesting things to relate to cinema in very many ways. Of course, I will not be talking much about Hindi cinema because the topic is chaos in cinema, not chaotic cinema. So there is a difference between the two. Okay. So, I mean, I could have included some portion, I mean, light-hearted manner. There's everything done in Indian cinema is not chaotic. Some lot of good work also has been done. But for this particular theme and given the time constraint, I thought that I will expose you to films which ordinarily have not been really seen by everyone, I feel. So, yeah, one moment. Let me close this other browser so that it doesn't disturb Chrome browser. Yes, okay. So now, chaos is an unpleasant and quite often an undesirable word, ordinarily speaking. The multiple forms of chaos that we experience each day, such as the traffic congestion, the law and order situation, the general social indiscipline, explain why it's so. However, chaos is the antithesis of order, and we must understand this word in its dialectical relationship with order. These two words are like two sides of the two sides of the coin. One exists in reference to others. We just talk about one, but we always have an implicit other reference of the other thing, and which is how I'll explain before I come to cinema. Now, given the perceived difficulties and threats to our individual and social lives, we crave for security, individual as well as social. Order creates a secure environment within which economic, scientific, educational, religious, and cultural activities can prosper. But again, too much of order makes us uneasy and unhappy, as we call it dictatorship. Totalitarianism does have multiple forms. It can be religious, it can be of military kind. We've seen all that. However, one claim that all of them make is that theirs is the perfect society and it has a total orderliness. So that word is very, very keen. They said we have no problems, there is order in everything is spick and span. So this is one aspect of order, the extreme end of order we must understand. They even boast of stamping out any chaos, ambiguities to create the most sanitized social environment, needless to say, totally controlled by the powers that be. However, the human society is also blessed with free spirits such as artists, thinkers, scientists, and others who constantly look at life beyond the mundane rationality of everyday life. हुई मुद्दत के गालिब मर गया पर याद आता है वो हर एक बात पर कहना कि यूं होता तो क्या होता. These two lines from Ghalib come to my mind. I'll repeat. हुई मुद्दत कि गालिब मर गया, पर याद आता है वो हर एक बात पर कहना कि यूं होता तो क्या होता. Through ages he's been dead, Ghalib is. Still thought of today as every tries to ask what would be if it were this way. यूं होता तो क्या hota is the key phrase here. Ghalib has summed up an ever alive question in human minds in an astonishingly simple phrase. He wasn't the only one to view ambiguities and chaos creatively. I present a few quotes here from some of the most famous people to illustrate this point. First comes Friedrich Nietzsche. You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. Our real discoveries come from chaos, from going to the place that looks wrong and stupid and foolish. This is Chuck Palahniuk, the man who wrote Fight Club and Invisible Monsters, from which films have been made. Chaos is what we lost touch with, and that is why it is given a bad name. It is feared by the dominant archetype of our world, which is ego, which clenches because its existence is defined in terms of control. This is by Terence McKenna. In chaos, there is fertility. This is Anais Nin, the famous feminist author. All the most powerful emotions come from chaos: fear, anger, love, especially love. Love is chaos itself. This is Kirsten Miller. I have an idea that the only thing which makes it possible to regard this world we live in without disgust is the beauty which now and then men create out of chaos. The pictures they paint, the music that they compose, the books they write, and the lives they lead. This is by Somerset Maugham. Invention, it must be humbly admitted, does not consist in creating out of void, but out of chaos. This is Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. Every morning, I jump out of bed and step on a landmine. The landmine is me. After the explosion, I spend the rest of the day putting the pieces together. This is Ray Bradbury. Finally, chaos was the law of nature. Order was the dream of man, by Henry James, a novelist. Now, this is, I put this quotation at the end because, repeat it, chaos was the law of nature, order was the dream of man, which is exactly what science tries to probe. I mean, how out of this initial chaos, life happened. How did it happen? So science seek and establish an order that things can be rationally explained. Now, the origin of life and the purpose of life have been themes that for centuries men have been speculating, even after so many things which have been scientifically discovered. And there's some very interesting approaches to it. Religion, of course, demanded absolute faith and no questioning. So it created, but it could not plausibly explain various natural phenomena and birth these things. So they created myths of creation. Every religion has variety of myths of creation. I mean, our Puranas are full of that. We know about Bible, Adam and Eve, and for 6 days God created the world, and 7 days He rested, etc., etc. In every religion, you'll find this kind of myths. So the religion took the way of mythology, and it was faith bound. So if you followed that religion, there was no question. There was, because the prophet, once you say that the prophet said so, there was no questioning of it. Then philosophy. In India, we have this Shvetashvatar Upanishad. The very first shloka of Shvetashvatar Upanishad is very interesting. It has always stayed in my mind when I read it. It's speculative. This whole entire thing, dialogue, the Upanishad is not written like a poetry, but this one is written very speculation about time, space, what is it, the nature of it. It's not about God, or it's not about any faith as such. In that sense, it is secular, in the sense that it's a purely mental and metaphysical inquiry, a rational inquiry, I would say. Now, look at this first line. It's simple. even if you know a little bit of Sanskrit. Kim Karanam Brahma. Brahma is the supreme being. Kutasma Jata. Jivam Ken. Kvachasam Pratishtha. Adhishtitha Ken. Surotareshu. Sukhetareshu. Vartamahi. Brahma Vido Vyavastham. Now, Kim Karanam Brahma. Supreme being, expanders of Brahma, thus reflect. Is Brahma the cause of the universe? Kim Karanam Brahma. Why does it exist? Is it the cause of the universe? Kutasma Jata. From whom have we been created? Jivam, by whom do we live? What is the foundation for our life? Why do we live? What is the purpose? Kwacha Sampradaya, what is the foundation? Whom do we depend? Adhishtita Ken, whom we depend on. Under whose superintendence do we exist in happiness and nurturing? Adhishtita Kena Sukhetareshu Vartamahi. In happiness and nursery, what is the superintendence that governs us in the O no, knowers of Brahma? Let us consider and come to a decision. Tell me, this is how it calls for a debate. Its opening is made in the space for debate. Now, science tries to deal with evidence-based theories in a rational mode with these issues. I mean, you're more familiar with this, so I need not to really elaborate. I mean, from inorganic to organic, and protoforms, and then how the evolution took place is it's a long story. So the arts, even science fiction, seems to have followed the narrative mode in communication. Again, I bring in Ghalib here. There's another, the same ghazal, the opening which I read, which I began with, comes later. But this is a stanza which is, these are the first two lines which, the opening lines of this same ghazal, where he says again, न कुछ था तो खुदा था, कुछ न होता तो खुदा होता, डुबोया मुझको होने ने, न होता मैं तो क्या होता. Now, in nothingness, God was there. Had there been nothing in the world that would have persisted, there would have been a God. Duboya mujhko hone ne. My existence has weighed me down completely. What if I were not there? Now, this is nothing but an existential riddle. And you can see that Ghalib comes into the, I mean, Ghalib was in the world when Mahatma Gandhi, just towards the end of it. I mean, they almost like, Mahatma Gandhi was already a few months old when Ghalib died, actually. So he is 19th century. And then we see that his Upanishads and others go way back, centuries. So this quest, of making sense of chaos, or this chaos has been a very driving and a very creative kind of a spirit. And therefore, all across the cultures, all across these various things, you'll find inquiries in people looking into it. Now, before I come to cinema, I don't want to deal with all the other arts, but I just want to deal with the visual arts because they're the closest to cinema. The painting, we know that the history of at least 40,000 years. The oldest cave paintings we found at Altamira in Spain, Niort in France, and Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh. They're dated to be 30, 40,000 years old. Interesting thing about those is that there is one bison which has been painted with 8 legs. Primitive man knew that. I mean, he has eyes like you and me, and he knew that bison was a 4-legged animal, but he was painting him to be an 8-legged animal. Why? He was trying to show movement. Also, those rock paintings are without a frame. They're freely drawn. There's no kind of narrative. They're different kind of items, more like in a museum. But when I began to think about it, actually putting a frame around it, was a big evolution. It was a big step forward. Why? Because it was a free anarchic world of the rock paintings. I mean, somebody went and put one there, then another one put another one there. We don't know. These are all anonymous works. But when you put a frame in it, in a course of time, a signature also emerged, over there. So the individuality and the whole world was now composed, bound, as it were. Time and space were bound within a frame. So that transition to frame, whenever it happened, was an important this thing, and that's a legacy that cinema came. So it was not like an open content that you could form, one picture or cluster of pictures. So it was like things were getting configured now, to use our today's word. You put a frame, so it meant a composition. Within that, your eye was traveling. It was bound to stay within a frame, etc., which is exactly what happens in cinema. So cinema came into being, but informed, enriched by the legacy of painting. Before cinema was the still photography, which actually gave us this concept of frame, which is what we also had in cinema. Now let's see. Beginning, I will just share the very famous sequence from 2001 Space Odyssey, because it again begins with the same this thing. Now this is, mind you, this is a very iconic film about the space agency. It was 1969-70 the film was made. uh, no less than the scientists at NASA who were involved in space missions were consulted, to make models, and the authenticity of the film was praised a great deal by this film by Stanley Kubrick. Now it's about space age film, futuristic film, looking ahead towards going to the space and moon and so on and so forth. But the film begins with the dawn of man, the same thing that I began talking to you with. And this is what really strikes me. It doesn't, and then it comes to its own this thing. So why does he give this kind of an extended prologue? And there's this very famous sequence, discovery of tool and what it does. So I'll just play a few minutes of that for you.
Professor, we can't see your screen. Hello, Professor? Hello, Professor Zankar?
Yeah? You're not getting it?
Yeah, we can't see your screen.
One sec. I was sharing actually, so. One sec. Yeah. Now you will. this this is a very famous transcendental cut. You know, the bone going up and then it falls. There's a void, and suddenly you see the spaceship. You know, going to that. So there's this whole travel, the eons. You know, which have gone into the evolution. That is what Kubrick is starting with. From here to here, we're giving. So this is a kind of a prologue that he's talking about. So the whole orderliness begins, you know, going beyond gravity and the world of science, etc. So he says that this is how we began, and this is where we are now at this point in the history. Okay, so cinema since its inception today, over 125 years, has always been, as I told you, a framed reality. Now, how did cinema begin? Initially, these were simple curiosity satisfying moments, actuality footages, you know, like if you stand in the balcony today and you have a mobile camera and you do a video. So similar manner, people were doing videos. Everything that was happening independently of the camera. Camera was just merely recording it. Then came this idea of fiction, and this is how Lumiere program, the first show of cinema, actually started. There was no storytelling as we call it today. Méliès was like Jules Verne and others, a fantasy creator, and he was a magician. So he tried to bring Cinderella and the stories of Trip to the Moon. So very primitive kind of sci-fi, he began doing. Very fanciful, chaotic imagination, you know, and evidence of all that. Falke also started with mythology, trick effects, you know, and establishing a completely different reality, very different from everyday reality. However, the one genre of cinema and silent cinema, which in fact prospered and thrived and made chaos extremely enjoyable all over the world, was the slapstick comedy. I mean, all of us know about Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Laurel Hardy, were some of the greatest creators, and they made cinema. They, in fact, played this particular genre in cinema. They made it, it helped that cinema became, because those days till 1927, 28, cinema did not have sound. So language was not a barrier. These films could be shown all across. And they made cinema immensely popular because people came back to see again and again. I wanted to show you Chaplin's actually Circus, one of his greatest films. But today it seems that from YouTube, it has been removed. I mean, all these years it has been there. Yesterday I queued it. And today I was just trying to find it. So it says that it has been withdrawn. So there is another one, but which again fits the theme. In Chaplin, you can find a lot of themes suggesting this, or Buster Keaton. Now, this is very interesting here, this particular sequence. Chaplin's Modern Times is one of the big satires, you know, on time and study motions. So it was this whole automation. You'll find that around the same time, the word robot was born. You know, the play was written by Karel Čapek in the 1930s. RUM, Universals, that is where you use the word robot first, and the concept of robot company. Robot actually is a Slavonic word which means labor or slave labor. So that's how that word is come, robot. So Chaplin, incidentally, in a comedy, working around the same ideas, you know, that somebody is selling this idea of making a very efficient or time-consuming, you know, processes, cutting down, you know, in industry, in corporate world, they call the word downtime. So they're constantly, the thing is that 100% utilization or towards 100% utilization of machinery and means should be there for profit maximization. And it can be very inhuman in certain ways. So all the experiments which are going on. So Chaplin parodies them in his film Modern this thing, because there's a man who's trying to give a demo and he says that I made a machine, and Chaplin becomes the money, is the guinea pig, you know, utilizing the machine. They said that you don't even have to give a lunch hour to them. You know, they will sit there and the machine will be, whole process will be automated. They will feed the worker, do everything. So in 5-10 minutes, the lunch will be over. They don't have to leave and they can immediately go back to work. So there's the first trial of this based on, now this is those days. For those days, this will be 1936. This must be great or ultra high tech, you know, by today's definition, if you look at it. So this is what actually the feeding machine scene. Well, it's almost leads to violence, as you can see. I mean, it's funny. I mean, you see it because we know it's not really real, but the monstrosity and the violence, implicit in that idea of how you can be subjective. And there's not eating is a personal act. It's an act of relaxation, but even that is denied to you. You convert it into a machine. So in an organized manner, when you try to do that, it's through chaos that he's actually making a comment by creating a certain chaos on the screen, basically. Okay, the next one I'll skip. Wanted to show in the documentary tradition. We don't have time for that. But okay, so let's move on because we run short of time. So okay, now I'll jump ahead to the sound era, which is 1960s. 1960s was a period of counterculture because in Europe it was, or everywhere else also, it was the end of World War II in 1945, and all the damage and the environment, the world had changed. There was this Cold War and the power blocks and so on and so forth. The whole world had become familiar with itself through the war and everything at that point. I mean, practically even Asia was not so involved in the First World War, but even now we were involved from the side. So a country like India, which was not even an independent country. After that, after the Second World War, a lot of countries began to get independent, the colonized countries in Asia, Africa. A new power block, new world, in fact, emerged. At the same time, a young generation which had grown up at that time was very, very disillusioned. The basic faith in life and what were told as the kind of values they were brought up with, they became very cynical, and somehow the world was not really addressing the aspirations and what the younger people wanted. So there was a whole culture of protest, or what came to be known in the 60s. Throughout the 60s, it grew. It came to the counterculture movement that grew. In fact, the students' unrest was universal. In USA, Sorbonne, India also, around 68, 69, we had various youth movements. In 70s, Navnirman in Gujarat, Naxalbari movement in 68, 69, which was again young students participated at that time. In 1968 is considered a watershed year because there are 3 or 4 places, Sorbonne in Paris, University in USA, in UK, in other places also it happened, that in Sorbonne students took over and said that we are running this university, anymore. And they invited for a dialogue person like Jean-Paul Sartre as their guest, saying that we've taken over this university, now you come in. Something similar happened in USA at that particular point. In fact, the poet Stephen Spender has written a book on that entire movement called The Year of the Young Rebel. So this is bound to reflect in arts. Avant-garde movements view what came to be known in England and other ways, the theater of the absurd, completely illogical behavior, which has also become a strong legacy. It saw its influence in India also. These were the kind of flavor of the day in the arts. And in Czechoslovakia, again, in the countries which Churchill called them as behind the Iron Curtain, the satellite countries which were run over by the Soviet Union at that time, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, part of Germany, East Germany, that is, etc. So in Czechoslovakia, in fact, there arose a movement called the Prague Spring, where the local communist leaders gave a lot of freedom, but the Russians washed it up to a point in 1968. The Russian tanks moved into Czechoslovakia, and that is the end of the spring period. The leading Czech leaders were removed and so on and so forth. So during that time, such a small country, and they had brilliant filmmakers. like Yuri Menzel and Vera Chitilova, both of whom are no more, died recently. So Vera Chitilova was a very brilliant filmmaker, and she made this film, which represent this absurdity and the chaotic conditions of that time. Around two main protagonists called daisies, and the behavior that you see. This is the beginning portion of the film. I'll play for you.
Ani to mi nejde. Tak co nám jde? Nic nám nejde. Co děláš? Panu. Jsem takhle jako pana, ne? Já jsem pana. Aha. Chápeš to? Nikdo nic nechápe. Nikdo nás nechápe. Všechno se nám kazí na tom světě. Co všechno? Tak všechno. Na tom světě. Víš co? Když se všechno kazí, tak budeme kažené i my. Správně. Vadí. Nevadí. Co to máš? Co to cucáš? Ukáž. Ne. Co tam děláš? Je tam něco? Pojď. Au.
So on and so forth, because this kind of behavior is exactly like what, if you've seen plays of theater of the absurd, like John Osborne and others, Ionesco and so on and so forth. I mean, this is completely illogical behavior. There's some narrative thread in between, but the style and everything is like this. Towards the end, they go to all the instruments of what you call bourgeois culture, the banquet, nicely, sumptuously laid out things. They just dance on the table and just smash everything. That sequence is very, very long, so I couldn't incorporate it here. But I just show you the beginning so that you understand what's happening in the style is. Okay, now another film of Michelangelo Antonioni made at this point, the Zabriskie point, but it makes the same point. So it's a repetition of that principle. So I'll skip that. What I want to come is to the 20th century, now 21st century actually, and there was a series of films made by several leading filmmakers were invited to make a film within 10 minutes. 10 minutes was the thing. It was called 10 Minutes Older. The series was called 10 Minutes Older, and they were asked to make the film. Chen Kaige is a famous Chinese filmmaker who made this film 100 Flowers Hidden Deep. Now, 100 flowers has a certain significance in China because during the Cultural Revolution, Mao's slogan was "Let 100 flowers bloom." So it has that reference here. Now, this is about Beijing and what happens in Beijing in contemporary times in 21st centuries. So it's a 10-minute film, so I think we'll just be in time, so I'll cut out other things. But this will tell you exactly, the point chaos and order and how the dialectic works out in this film is really, really worth seeing.
搬家公司吧？
啊，
你家能帮着搬搬吗？
行啊，给钱的活都干。
给钱，给钱。
住哪儿啊您？
我们家住胡同，百户深处胡同。
怎么走啊？
宽街奔西，地安门大街奔北，见着鼓楼，左手第一条。胡同就是好走。
Professor, you're muted. We can't hear you.
好，怎么称呼啊您？
冯，都叫我冯先生。
哥几个，哎，走了，走。
那
上车呀您？
谢谢您，真是。
司机朋友请注意，下面插播北京市公安交通管理局指挥调度中心提供的路况信息。目前本市方向是经纬大街西向
哎，得把您那头烫上去啊！不让警察瞧见了，这不给我找事儿吗？
我怎么糊涂了？这是哪儿啊？走错了吧？
这不是平安大道吗？前面就是地安门大街了。
您这口是北京人呐？怎么这儿长宽成平安大道都不知道啊？
如今就这老北京才在北京迷路呢。
哎，到这儿我就认识了，就顺着这儿下去。哎，到了，到了，前面就是。 就这儿，到了，哎呀，这就是百货深处。哎，哪儿呢？这儿啊，进了胡同口啊，第一个门就是，这是我们家影呗，这是我们家院子，2进的院子，几位赶紧搬吧。
你丫算谁呢？这么大岁数了。
哎，你们怎么走了？家还没搬呢，先帮我搬了家。哎，你怎么走了？
头儿。
哎，
在哪儿呢？
百货深处。
大槐树那儿吧？
啊。
这2天啊，老有一人缠着让咱们给他搬家。那天小六子跟着去了，一看什么都没有，差点抽他。一打听，那人是一疯子。
疯子？我说他怎么不知道平安大道呢？
哎，别忘了啊，把账跟他结了。
好嘞。
冯先生，您跟我们回去吧。再说了，我们这趟也不能白跑啊，出了车您得给钱啊。
你们还没帮我搬呢，搬完了我就给钱。
你这什么也没有啊？
这不都在这儿呢吗？
冯先生，只要您给钱，您让我们搬什么，我们就搬什么。您说怎么搬，我们就怎么搬。
那搬吧。
1、2起。
等等，你们这是抬什么呢？
这不大衣柜吗？
大衣柜？我们家没有大衣柜，我们家用的是紫檀的衣橱。
那您说这是什么呀？
这是我们家的金鱼缸。
对，您瞧这金鱼还跟里头游呢。
哎，我说您小心点，这是你的爱物，别给碎了啊！真是慢着点啊！
好嘞，好嘞。
哎，留神。
下步啊，慢点，慢点啊。
慢点，慢点。
当你丫乐什么呀？快给人那花瓶搬过来。
等等，我说，花瓶怎么会在这儿呢？花瓶怎么能在这儿呢？哎，那花瓶应该在哪儿啊？
我哪知道啊？
应该在堂屋，应该在堂屋的条案上啊。
哦，在那儿。
哎，
在那儿。
哎，这不在这儿呢吗？哎，您瞅瞅，这就是我们家檐子下面铃铛里那个档子，遇着刮风下雨的时候，叮叮当当好听着呢。哎，您瞅瞅，哎，这就是我们家檐子下那铃铛里那档子，
没错。
遇着夜里刮风下雨的时候，叮叮当当好听着呢。您瞅瞅，留神脚底下，小心点啊，别滑着。哎，慢点，别碰着你。哎呦，慢点。哎，
瞧着点。
干嘛呢你？您可小心点，这飞沫哥。哎呦，这可是前清的灯座，您真的小心。1、2，这是走完的，配了可就没有了。
哎，花呢？
真是让您费心了。您，哎你，啊。你给我啐了。
你给我啐了，你给我
钱？
刚才不是把您当菜了，这事算我们赔您的。
前头有一沟留神。
您什么都知道。
真有一沟，让土给盖着了。哎呦！真是，我说这儿有一沟吧，哎呦，真是陷进去了，哎呦。这不在这儿呢吗？这不在这儿吗？找着了。搬新家嘞！搬新家喽！搬新家喽！
Yes. So this is, you can see the obvious critique of the new development regime and the policy in Beijing. I mean, the way that they've done things, what one has heard of that. The only word one can, they've done it on gigantic scale, but it's done in a very monstrous way. I mean, if they want to build up a whole settlement tomorrow, if they want to shift half of Bane or full of Bane, they'll already first build something in some other place. People will be given 7 days notice, etc. All those people who living here, they will be earmarked and everything will be ready beforehand. The state will send people and they have no choice. Just this is a vehicle. Today you shift or tomorrow you shift or in 7 days later you shift. So all the transport vehicle, everything is arranged for. So it's just from home to wherever they are slotted, straight away they are taken there. That's done efficiently. There's no problem with that. But you have no choice, no voice, nothing. In China, when they built the Three Gorges Dam, they moved 1 crore people, 1 crore. That is much larger a population than a lot of European nations. I mean, today we're reading about Crimea, Moldova. Moldova is a small state, one country which broke out of USSR. That has a population of 25 lakhs. I don't know how much Ukraine has. You know, to shift 1 crore people and resettle them within the country. It's a large country, all right, but 1 crore is a very, very tall order. Without bothering about anything, the protest or anything in the world, the largest kind of dams that they built, 3 quarters. So these are the kind of things which have happened. Now, out here, I mean, I've seen 1 or 2 feature films on the same thing. There was a film called The Chinese Barber, which was shown in Pune International Film Festival some years ago. Similar story, this kind of modern environment, and the man is actually living in that, the one which you see dilapidated. It's just before demolition, is still living in that old quarters. One side of it, in front of it, houses are demolished. They're still living in that old house rows where they're yet to be demolished. His son and daughter have already moved into one of those skyscrapers. So for a change, he goes and stays there. And his friends advise him, why don't you get used to it? And out there, he's like a fish out of water. So he returns to come back. And the whole angst was about, that. So therefore, this dialogue that nowadays in Beijing, the old people just get, because the whole city has changed unrecognizably. And these are this cultural, what shall I say? These are the cultural deposits. This is something that has traditionally come out, because he says that, what are you doing? So he says, I'm moving a bureau. He says, we don't have a bureau. We have simple, this thing table there, this chair there, and move this, and the vase. The vase is something which is traditionally kept in the family. So it's like a legacy of the family. A lot of things are associated with it. So when that breaks the bangla. The bells that we nowadays present to people that's supposed to bring home, and in India and last about few years, last about 15-20 years, we have seen this phenomenon, the bells which ring and chime when the wind comes into the house. That's supposed to be a good omen. So it's that bell which he finds there. So he says now finally that is the entrance of the house, and then in imagination these people see, as well as they say, it's that goes into the surreal mode and the whole absurd behavior, like where they actually start reacting and they start believing because they want money. And finally the whole term that it takes place, the money just become redundant, because without exchanging the words, we realize that great deal of legacy, great deal of past has just been destroyed in all this without any consideration, without any participation of the people. Yeah, so that is it. So I'll stop here. Now it's just 1 hour past. So I skipped on that because I thought that towards the end we'll bring up to date and show the entire film, which is barely 10 minutes, but makes several points that make us think about it. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much
Thank you for
for your
such an
attention.
interesting talk. It was really wonderful to watch all these things and learn more about them. In case anybody has anything to discuss or any questions, feel free to open up.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, Professor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are talking about this chaos in cinema, and I believe like the last part that you mentioned about this whole industrialization or the skyscrapers in China. I mean, I was watching a film. It's by Lulu Yang. It's called The Farewell. It's not related to it, but I mean, every Chinese filmmaker that I have that who are actively making film as an art, who does see film as an art, that is something they always put up in all these skyscrapers in their home. They all some 20 or 30 years ago where they used to live, and the place is not similar to that. That is something that is being very familiar with the Chinese filmmakers. Similarly, I like watching all those clips. I remember Satyajit Ray in one of his books. He says that in most of the filmmakers belong to a certain country and they try to represent a certain community or certain country, right? But Satyajit Ray, in one of his interviews, Satyajit Ray was trying to make a point is that in those countries where there is a stability in socioeconomic condition, where there is a stability in circumstances, they try to thrive. They try to make cinema on their personal views, on their personal experiences. Whereas in those countries where there is a turmoil, where there is a certain something is going on, they try to comprehend that particular chaos. And I mean, isn't it obvious that whenever a film is being seen as an art, isn't chaos a very intrigued is a very intrigued part of that particular cinema? I mean, if even if we don't talk about a very chaotic, very directly chaotic cinema, like you showed, if we talk about filmmakers like Andrei Tarkovsky, I mean, if we talk about even if we talk about 1001 Space Odyssey, the last few moments of this particular movie, that was very chaotic. I mean, we didn't have a clue of where the particular astronomer was going, how was he going through, and the filmmaker never revealed anything about the particular cinema. And like even if we think about Wes Anderson, that Wes Anderson film is something not really very natural. It's not, I would not say it's very chaotic, but it's very unnatural. It's very uncanny. Wes Anderson, filmmakers like Wes Anderson have their particular way of viewing things. The question I would like to put is that isn't chaos a very intriguing like inner part of art? Maybe that may be cinema in this particular reference. And the fact that is chaos in cinema a very region specific or culture specific thing? I mean, if like if the representation of chaos depends on culture to culture, varies on region to region, or it's a very universal thing?
There's no contradiction in that. First of all, it is a universal phenomenon, but the forms that it will take will be different. I mean, it's like falling in love, but the ways people would express in different conditions in different cultures is different. So similarly, the issues, the chaos, say for instance in Iran, or chaos in China, chaos in India, takes different regions, different forms, and how do you, I mean, chaos is the term that it was given. So, there might be words in this neighborhood. It can be violence, it can see, China and, sorry, China and Iran are
Yes,
completely totalitarian societies.
exactly.
You cannot, I mean, Iranian films, that's another
Yeah,
example that I'll
like
give.
filmmakers like Makmal Baf or Kiarostami, they represent the same
They're
thing, but
all
in a very
outside.
whole
They're
different way.
all outside Iran making
Exactly.
films.
Right.
Because I mean, one of their greatest actors is Gulshift Tejparani. She's acting in Hollywood. She stays in Paris.
Exactly.
Because she's made film in Afghanistan. Because those kind of film, I'll tell you. I'll give you an example. I mean, I'll give you tell you an experience when I was teaching at FTI in the 1980s, early days, and this was the post Khomeini days. The Khomeini was still firmly in command after that Islamic revolution, and a delegation of Iranian archive people had come, and they were watching films. That time, National Film Archives of India had a campus, but they did not have an auditorium of their own. So they used to use our, meaning FTI, as auditorium. And the Iranians were watching a lot of Indian films. And finally, out of the list that we saw, so some people got talking to them and they said that, what films have you chosen? So they mentioned this. And so the person was really surprised that one of the films that they had omitted was Pather Panchali. So people said, why? And it was very revealing because they said that, the film is indecent. It doesn't fit into the portrait. So this man went for a toss. I mean, the first time ever in his life or anybody's life that he heard that Pather Panchali is an indecent film. So he said, why? He said it violates our code. He says, why? So the man said that, but where is nudity? Where is violence? What is there in Pather Panchali that you can just possibly object to? I just can't see. The whole world has acknowledged this as a classic. So he said that you see the little girl, which is Durga, pre-puberty, and she was going around topless. A little girl, which is about 3 feet height, going around topless. So he said that this is but those days, village and that kind of society. He said, no, sorry. Then, as a person who was talking to them, we understood that they had a very rigid moral code. For instance, in the Iranian film, you'll never see a man even catching the hand of a woman.
Exactly.
Not allowed. Bedroom scenes you cannot see, even if if the characters are husband and wife, and even if they are sitting 10 feet apart in the bedroom, it's a bedroom, private quarters. So husband and wife you cannot show. Women normally, no matter what the role or situation is, have to cover their heads.
Right.
I mean, there are so many restrictions that you not seen a single Iranian film in which a man, kind of couple or in love catches the hand of a woman. And therefore, people like Jafar Panahi and Abbas Kiarostami, they ran into trouble. Later on, they were making films outside. Jafar Panahi spends time inside and outside the jail.
Yes, right.
So that is another way of what happens. I mean, all the very, very highly critical film called To Live, it's very sensitive and it's a great film by Zhang Yimou, was made in 1992. It's like de-Maoization. It finishes at Mao's death at that time, 78, 79. The entire atrocities through the family are distant, but not beyond that. So which means that the regime wants to move on. It was Tang Xiaoping's time, who was denounced that time during the Maoist raid as a capitalist ruler. So now that critique of this thing was possible. Exactly what happened in Soviet Union in 1956 when Stalin died. After that, Khrushchev made this speech and the de-Stalinization began. And then, it was accepted officially that the earlier regime was terrible and, we will not make the mistakes. And so that those kind of things were revived. So that becomes possible later on, but not during the regime. No regime will allow, this kind of a regime will allow critical things.
Yeah, actually,
and in fact, we have seen these Iranian students used to conduct Pune had become a theater of protest. First time I learned of Khomeini was on MG Road in Pune. I saw a poster of a imam, wearing beard and all. So I asked some of our Iranian students. Then I got to know who. Before that, I had not even heard of Khomeini. So they had two groups. One was the leftist group, the other was the Islamic groups. And different groups, they used to, and they were very mortally scared of SAVAK, which was the agency, the Iranian secret police.
Right.
So they used to wear, even the boys used to wear masks, but they used to parade on MG Road. They used to parade in Delhi. So all this protest movements and marches were taking place in Pune. They were peaceful, of course. Never anything happened, but that's how we used to see that. So those are the kind of things when you're outside you can do that, but within your own country, it was not possible, and that the regime's role remains still. That kind of code I don't think has really changed even after Khomeini's death, etc.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's this interesting introspection regarding in one of the movies, either it's Makmalbaf or it's Kiarostami. The movie is called Gabe, right? So, like in one point of the time, Gabe.
Sorry, what's it called?
Gabbeh. Gabe. Gabbeh.
No, I haven't seen this. No, I haven't seen this.
So either most probably it was Makmalbaf. So Makmalbaf in one point of time, Makmalbaf was making movies, and he was being politically, like they won't just make him, allow him to make movies regarding the socioeconomic cultures at this time. That was actually a Taliban time. Okay, so he was like a carpet company came to him and they asked him to make a movie around promoting carpets, handmade carpets, that the nomadic culture made.
Persian.
Exactly. So that at that time he had to take permissions from the Taliban regime whether I will be able to make this film or not. So they were Taliban regime were like, okay, you are going to.
Where was Taliban in Iran? Taliban in Iran.
No, it's not Taliban, but there is a certain. No,
it's the same Islamic regime. It remains. It's continuous.
Exactly.
Somebody else has come. No, Taliban.
Right. That is my bad. So he had to ask permission for making this movie, right? So they were like, the authority was like, okay, you're gonna make a movie about this particular carpet, this nomadic culture. So yeah, you can make that movie. But the point is that in that particular movie, this director showed so many colors, so many variations about this particular nomadic culture. The point of the movie was that even they are nomadic, they are more free than those people that are living in metropolitan. The whole point of the movie was that, and he represented that carpet as a omen who is omnipresent. Okay, he has been there when the carpet was being made. She has been there when after the carpet was made, and the woman has been communicating with all the audiences in her own way. So that is one way of like people like directors like that, like those always make a point of always protesting. They can't, even if they can't make it in a direct way, they always put it in an indirect way. And I am a Bengali. Yes. I am a Bengali. Regarding those Pathir Pachali, like Pathir Pachali is actually written by Vibhutibhushan Bandyopadhyay, and as a Bengali, I have grown up breathing Pathir Pachali. Okay, even before I saw the movie, I knew everything about Pathir Pachali. Even before I tried to understand the movie, I knew a little bit of who Satyajit Ray was, because Satyajit Ray, Rabindranath Tagore, these are very imbued in Bengali culture. So in Pathir Pachali, the point that you mentioned, that there is no new town. That like, Pathir Pachali is a very like inherent thing to all of us, at least to the Bengali culture. So that kind of misunderstanding, that is very prevalent.
It's not misunderstanding. No, that's what I'm telling you. It's not about misunderstanding. Achha. It's about the cultural codes.
It's about cultural
codes. Right. This is a complete non-application of the mind. I mean, right. You think the man doesn't understand that the girl? There's nothing sensuous.
Exactly. I get that point.
This is a totalitarian system. That how it works. See, for instance, the protests have been done by Mrinal Sen. Protests have been done by Satyajit Ray.
Exactly.
I mean, in that sequence, when in Pratidandi goes for the interview, and he's asked that there's a question: what, according to you, is the biggest event of this century? So
he should be.
They have different. Just a minute. Let me complete. Others may not know this. So the answer that is expected, he gives an answer, the Vietnam War. So it shocks people. And they said, not man going to the moon. This was 71. So it was just a couple of years after that. So He says no. And then there's a silence, and one of the people who are interviewing him asks him a question, are you a communist? Now, Rai returns to this theme in his last film, Agantuk, where the main character played by Utpal Dutt, who has been,
Yeah, I have seen the
it's
movie.
a reflection actually of Rai in that. And again, he reiterates that about science, and it's a frontal attack. He says that, what are you talking about? You have so many glories of that, but you also brought this destruction, on that. So there are certain concerns with filmmakers which are deep rooted, and they expect. Now Pratyudandi was made in 71, and this film was his last film, so there's nearly about 15, 16 years and several films in between that, but the concerns repeat, in very many ways. So there, how much you are allowed to do, or otherwise, people like Menzel and Chitilova now, for instance, they took these forms to get past the censors. Even then they had to fight, because you see, there were party bureaucrats, and somebody who was defining what realism or socialist realism or Marxism is sitting there as a bureaucrat on the censors. So that is how they have to operate. So it depends on what conditions the filmmakers get. Either the conditions are favorable or not favorable. So they develop these very oblique ways of saying to get past the censor, so that the script, you can say this is about it, and the censors obviously cannot, even if they know it, they cannot so make the situation in such a manner that they don't
Yes.
happen that object. They cannot succeed in objecting to you.
Right. So like it's all about chaos, right? The final there is always chaos in cinema.
No, but then in the beginning we said that, no, that this is like
Yes.
everybody, the various quotations I gave you, that point has already been made. It's out of chaos. Like Mary Shelley says that it's not out of void, but it's out of chaos that you bring. So it's the chaos which is intriguing. A chaos is something that intrigues a filmmaker. And that is why you make a film. If there a void, who would find any meaning in void? Void is void.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. That is a very interesting thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think if there's no one else, we can wrap up this now. Thank you so much for spending time with us. It was really wonderful to watch all these abstracts. Some of them were really moving.